Hello and welcome everybody to the September issue of the Flatcar Office Hours. We have a number of interesting items prepared for you today. If you want to join in and share your take, then you're invited to do so. I see just the team here, and we have a non-regular guest who's gonna go into some details of the upcoming org name change. That's Johanna. Would you take a minute, Johanna, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not part of the Flatcar team, but I'm collaborating with the team for the time being. In this context, I represent the Cluster API project for which I'm a contributor. And yeah, one of the topics we're going to discuss today is affecting Cluster API as well. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks. Let me share my screen so we can have a look at the agenda. There we go. All right. So today we'll take a look at the past events at Froshcon. So a few from the Flatcar team joined Froshcon. It's an open source conference, an annual one in Germany, and had a few presentations. We're looking at Hacktoberfest, which is upcoming, and we have a presentation on OpenStack infrastructure and how we add this to the Flatcar build and CI pipeline. Then we have an announcement. As already mentioned, our GitHub org will be renamed into Flatcar from Flatcar Linux. That shouldn't have any side effects because redirections should be in place, but we want to make it public and make a bit of noise about it anyways. And after that, we'll go to the release planning. And should guests join, we'll have a Q&A session after this. So let's start with our first item, and that is Froshcon. Matthew, since you've been working on a blog post on Froshcon, you wanna have a few words?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi everyone. So as Tilo mentioned, it was the Froshcon last weekend of August. A couple of folks from the Flatcar teams, nice picture. A couple of folks from the Flatcar teams were in Germany. So it was in St. Augustine, close to Cologne. And we held 3 talks regarding Flatcar, one about general introduction to the operating system by Tilo. We got a talk by Kai to explain and to define and to illustrate with some examples systemd sysx on Flatcar and on systemd instances, how does it work and how to deploy software with it. And finally, I gave a talk about ignition and how does it work and what's the principle of ignition. So yeah, that was the first time for me to this event. It was really nice, really, great family. Everyone knows everyone and can have a discussion with a bunch of interesting people. So yeah, that was really cool and looking forward to the next edition.
Awesome. And there's a small blog post coming up with a few links to resources and to the talks. And also from me, huge thanks to the Froshcon organizers. It's been amazing as always. My family and I, it's a very family-friendly event. My family and I have been around there for, I think, probably 10 to 12 years. It's always been an amazing experience. Great work, and thanks for being brilliant. Next item is the Hacktoberfest, which Sayan called out. You wanna lose a few words on that, Sayan?
Yeah, sure. So Hacktoberfest is a event organized by DigitalOcean. So it is primarily directed to promote open source contributions, and it has been happening for a couple of years now. And this year they just announced that Hacktoberfest would be happening, and the registration period would be starting towards the end of September. So the idea here is you submit 4 pull requests to the selected organizations, as in like the organization would opt in to take part in Hacktoberfest, and once you submit, you can get goodies, or you can choose to there are other options you can choose, but the idea here is to encourage open source, and it is a good way to get into open source. If you're looking to work on some projects, it's a good way to get into the project, interact with the maintainers. And the good news here is that Flatcar would be participating in Hacktoberfest. So feel free to join the matrix. Yeah, it's okay. It's a good time. I mean, we still have like 15 days left, so it's a good time to set up your environment and get familiarized with the whole Flatcar setup, and then you can send over the pull request as soon as October starts. And feel free to ask any question, any doubts over the matrix or the Slack channels, and we would love to help you out on whatever doubt you have. Yeah, and over to you, Thilo.
Awesome. Thanks for driving this, Siam. That's very, very awesome for the community, and we really look forward to your participations there. Now, for a more practical hands-on part of the office hours, Matthew presented a bit on our work with OpenStack, which is currently not a supported platform, but that might change in the future, as far as I understand the situation. Over to you, Matthew.
Okay, so yeah, quickly, just to give a status on this, Flatcar and OpenStack, we currently provide OpenStack images during the CI, but they are not being tested. And so yeah, we're not sure if everything works correctly and works fine. And also, we got some interaction on Twitter regarding the status of OpenStack images. So we have some out-of-date documentation also. I think most of this is from the CoreOS history. So yeah, we should be able to run OpenStack, Flatcar OpenStack images, but yeah, maybe there is some edge cases. So this is the current status, and recently we started to get some issues regarding OpenStack support, some things that was not tested. So the idea now is to be able to provide a good environment to test Flatcar on OpenStack and to be able to catch any issues before releasing in production. So we started to look into DevStack. So for people who was not familiar with OpenStack, DevStack is a simple way to deploy OpenStack infrastructure on a single instance. So it's a simple bash script that you run. It deploys everything you need. It creates the user, it creates the networks. So yeah, everything you need to be able to run OpenStack without taking ages to install everything. So it's quite handy, and it's mainly used by OpenStack developers to test new features and bug fixes, but can also be used locally if you want to locally test OpenStack. So we decided to this way to be able to provide a simple infrastructure for testing OpenStack in the CI. How does it work to test the image, Flatcar image on OpenStack? You just need to create the image using Mental. So you provide whether a local file or URL to a gunzipped images. It works in both cases, and it will create the image into the OpenStack infra. And then you can just run the test as usual using the image ID you just get from the image creation. So yeah, it's a two-step thing: create the image, then you run the test. Something we can quickly notify is that we added three more flags to the run command for OpenStack: the user, the host, and the key file. Why that? It's because when you deploy instances on OpenStack, they are in a private network, and if you want to be able to reach from the outside, you need to give some public IPs. So you need to have a pool of IPs. And to keep things simple, we decided to just let the instances provisioned with private IPs, and we just SSH jump on the DevStack instance. So when you just run run, it will SSH into the DevStack instance. Then from it will SSH into the instance deployed on the infrastructure. So it's the only things that change on this side. So if your test is not running correctly, you need to debug the instance, of course. So you can do that using SSH jump as usual. So you just need to provide the DevStack instance IP, and you can SSH into the instance after getting the private IP of this instance, and it's available on the Horizon dashboard. So it's really simple. Okay, that's it for this part. And the next steps, of course, this is done manually at the moment. So I take care of testing stuff manually before pushing something, or when I want to reproduce some failing test. So I try to do this on Openstack, but of course we would like to be able to add it to the vendor scripts in the new pipeline of the CI automation. So there is an issue, and in that issue there is a comment with what I said basically. So if you want to have a look to how we test things into Flatcar CI, feel free to take that issue. I think it's quite nice to ramp up on the CI automation scripts. And yeah, that's it. So for Kinvolk team member, Flatcar team member, all the credentials are in pull request for now. But yeah, basically what I've said is just you just need to update the IP 1234 by the current IP of the actual Stack instance, and it should work correctly. So yeah, that's it for OpenStack.
That is amazing work. Thank you for elaborating. It's great to see the number of supported platforms grow like that. Great work. Next up in the agenda is the org change. And I'm going to share my screen real quick. Share. So you can see that in the agenda discussion as well as in the issue tracker. We are planning to change the name of the organization from Flatcar Linux to just plain Flatcar, which should make it easier for folks in the long term, but may create some friction in the short term. Now, the friction we expect is mainly internal, and we're pretty much on top of that. We have a few PRs staged that will take care of the name change, and everything else should be taken care of by the redirects, which GitHub will set up basically automatically when you rename orgs. We've been working with GitHub support on this, so we're in contact with them, and they'll help a lot so that the whole thing goes right. It's been great working with them, so that needs to be called out, I guess. The org change will commence on Wednesday, the 14th of September, which is tomorrow. So a few transient bumps may be expected tomorrow when the org change happens. We'll put in an effort to mop up any fallout right on that day. And we're standing by for your issues should you encounter any. Now, a number of upstream and sidestream and downstream projects have been using references directly into the Flatcar org to the repositories there. And again, while we don't expect any issues, we've been in contact with some of those projects, with some of our own work in upstream projects like Cluster API, with other projects that use Go modules, which are from inside the Flatcar Linux org. And Johannes has been driving most of that work, particularly doing some great work with upstream Cluster API. And I'll give the word to Johannes on that.
Sure. So what I'm going to say also applies to other projects who consume Go dependencies from the Flatcar-Linux organization. The reason I'm specifically mentioning Go projects is that in Go, import paths includes an actual repository, such as GitHub repository. So other languages, while they might still consume dependencies from GitHub, as far as I know, I'm not aware of a similar language that has such a mechanism. So the rename should mainly affect Go projects. Repositories being the Flatcar Linux organization, we do have open draft PRs for the rename, so we're taking care of things ourselves. But basically, just to emphasize, end users shouldn't feel anything. Cluster API developers should rebase PRs once we do the rename and merge the draft PRs. Once you do the rebase, the next time you run go mod tidy, then the Go toolkit should re-download the code from the renamed organization, even though, as we said before, because of the redirect, even if you don't do that, even if you keep consuming things from the previous URIs, things should still hopefully work. But it's safer in the long run to do the rename anyway. A quick way to check if you're affected by the change is to grep your code base for github/flatcar-linux. And if you have any such reference, usually in the Go mod file, but also maybe in the code, or actually in both, then you are affected and you should do the rename. So that applies for projects who depend on repositories in the Flatcar Linux organization other than Cluster API. So if you are such a project, then you should check for references yourself. Again, projects we are involved in, we're already taking care of.
Awesome. Thanks for the update. And again, we don't expect any friction. It's just safer in the long term if at some point in time you schedule some maintenance work to do the grep and to replace the name of the organization with just plain Flatcar. All right. And by the way, thanks for all of your good work in the Cluster API project in general. It's amazing seeing that grow. Johannes, that's awesome.
Thanks a lot.
All right. It's release time planning. It's release planning time. Sayan.
Yeah, hi. So I'll share my screen. Yes, so as mentioned, this we have a release for 26th. So we'll be going ahead and doing the planning for the same. And as the team is kind of working in between like the GitHub name change and the CI automation pipeline. So we are targeting a lesser number of issues, but primarily the security fixes. So right now, we have a couple of them merged, which got merged this week and the previous week. And then Kashmir has been working on a couple of packages, namely the Vim, which has a bunch of CVs that needs to be updated. I've been working on the Intel Microcontroller and ZLib, which is almost ready. And Doxu has been working on the Golang one. And I know Matthew just merged the get text, or it's almost ready. So we would have the get text also merged, which is for a issue that we had. And the plan ones are the Docker, CoreOS firmware, and NVIDIA drivers, which should be merged within by 26th of by the time we do the release, which is 26th of September. And but folks, if you are since we talked about the Hacktoberfest, it's a good time if you want. There is a backlog of packages, so if you want to look into working on any package, there are a bunch you can pick up, and we would love to help you out in getting those the whole thing set up and getting those things more. So feel free to ping us on the Matrix channel. Other than that, yeah, so we had a couple of the bug fixes or the features that has been mostly targeted towards the new CI pipeline that has been working on. Anything else that you folks think that needs to be targeted other than these changes that that was called out? If no, then we can probably okay. So if not, just one thing I wanted to mention here is we would have a blog post soon, but the next release of the LTS would be the last one for the LTS 2021. So we have added a note in the last LTS release, this is the 2605.31.1, on how you could check if your nodes needs an action, and we have a detailed documentation on how you can actually change to a different stream. So this is something you want to look out if you are still on LTS 2021 and looking to move to LTS 2022. Yeah. So anything else to add? If not, then I'll hand over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for giving this overview. And so this will be the first release on our new and shiny automation pipeline, which should help us a lot in the long term. If folks recall, then we stretched the release frequency from 2 weeks into 1 month a while ago to give us more time to integrate and productize the new pipeline. This is almost done now. The first release is coming, and we're looking into getting back to the 2 weeks release cycle after that, which gives us a lot better reaction time. This may affect the end of September release slightly, so we might push it back for a few days. If you run into additional friction, we don't expect any at this point in time, but you know how it is when you put stuff into production. So that's that. Secondly, and that's also something we're looking into, we got feedback on our issue tracker regarding kernel patch level updates hitting beta and stable at the same time. The reason for that is both beta and stable are on the LTS kernel, and we're trying to stay as up to date as we can with kernel patches because we don't expect any breakage. That assumption has been proven wrong with the latest release, which run into some frictions in edge cases for some users. So what we're looking into currently is to release beta with a kernel patch on an LTS a week earlier, and then after a week follow up with stable on that. So that's something that we might establish in the near future. All right, that was pretty much all from my end. Anything from you folks that you want to bring up? All right, thanks for joining. Folks on the stream, thanks for watching, and see you in a month or in 2 weeks if you want to attend the next release planning.
See you. Bye-bye.